Alright guys, we are working on a 77 Harley Davidson Shovelhead. It's pretty much the same for anything from that era. Iron head, sporty, whatever. This is an FLH electric glide, so it's electric start. That's the system we're working on today. Don't be intimidated by the fact that the side of this thing is opened up. It's just 8 bolts and the primary comes off, all primary housing comes off. You just take out this little bolt right here in the bottom, drain your fluid, and there you go. So I got a rag down here to catch any little pieces that might fall. Here's your clutch. If you ever need to do a clutch, you just pull these guys off and it comes out and you take out your plates and your discs, put your new ones on. It's really simple too. But what we're doing today is the starter solenoid. So I already have it unhooked. There's 2 bolts back here. When this comes off, all my cables, I already redid it, rebuilt the starter solenoid. That's something else. What we're replacing is a little boot, little plunger boot that goes in here. So this goes through this hole into there. And I'll show you how all that looks on the bench. So here's a little plunger. Here's the old boot. It's pretty much disintegrated, there ain't much left. And here's a new one. I got a new boot, and a new washer for like less than 15 bucks. This is a little foam guy. And yeah, I'm gonna reassemble this. It's real simple. This guy goes on like that. You gotta pull this pin out, put the pin back on, and there's a little spring and a retainer clip and all that goes on once you put it in the primary. I'll show you that in a second. So I want to get this assembled, and I'll bring it over there and show you what we're working with. Alright guys, so I got my little plunger put on, a little boot. Take a look at her here. Now this is where I might get a little flack from the purists, saying that's not how you're supposed to do it, but I don't care. This design's been in service for over half a century, and every person I've seen talk about this has had the same problem with sealing this, sealing off the primary. This thing always leaks. This is a little foam washer guy, and it's supposed to go in the back of here, and it creates a little cushion here. It spaces all the boot out, and it helps keep the boot from deforming this part and all that. Well, they always leak, and a big problem with these primaries is if you seal them off the way I did, basically you take out the automatic oiling system and you disconnect all those hoses, you leave a little vent line, and you put fluid in the primary and run it more like a modern primary with a wet clutch. I got a Barnett Kevlar wet dry clutch in here. These leak even more because you don't have vacuum drawing on the case and sucking the oil out the bottom, so it really will leak a lot. I just came back from a trip and this thing was just puking oil everywhere. So what I decided to do, we'll see how it works, is I took that foam washer guy, I put it on the inside of the boot, and I already loaded this up with RTV, so it should seal pretty good in there. I cleaned all the surfaces down with rubbing alcohol so the RTV will seal. If you're gonna go this route and use RTV where there's any moving parts, Honda Bond, always use Honda Bond high temp. It's a non-hardening gasket material, and if any bits come off and break off in here, you won't get a bunch of rattles and noise in your gearbox. I do that for every motor I build. Every time I seal off an engine, it gets the same deal. That way you don't get any of that stuff rattling around in the crankcase. So I'm gonna put this guy on here like that. You can see the way it just slid in there. That should give me a really good seal when the starter solenoid here comes down and compresses over it. So I think you guys can see everything. Yeah. Now this is a little trick that I stole from someone else. You take some safety wire, do it on each side, and compress your spring. So I can get this guy on there. There we go. That way you don't have to hang on to it when you're trying to put this little keeper on there. I got a rag down here to catch anything I might drop, make it a little easier to retrieve it so it doesn't rattle down the side of the clutch basket there. Looks like my springs aren't quite compressed enough, so I'm going to crank those down a little bit more and get back to this. Alright, twisted that guy down a little bit more. See how this works. So let's hold my spring down, you put that collar in with the cup facing out. There's a little pin that slides in there, and that all operates on spring pressure. Spring pushes that cup up into this guy. Might be better off using some pliers on this. So the reason I decided to do this video is because this is the first time I have done this repair on a Shovelhead, and I couldn't find a video that showed me a clear breakdown on how to get this guy apart. So I figured I'd take the time and do one myself. So hopefully the next guy sees this and gives him a little info. I still don't got that spring compressed enough, as you can tell. Well, I'm gonna get this guy in. I'm not gonna make you guys watch that. Well, all right, man. That worked really, really well. So once I got that little cup, that spring in the, or that pin in the cup, I just clipped my little guys and yanked them out. That whole assembly's in there the way it should be. So it's all pushing on all of this, so I'm going to try and reassemble this and see how that goes. There's a little spacer plate that goes in there, and then a couple of bolts that you fish on to the end. So I'm going to do it by putting my bolts through the spacer, hold it on there. See how that works. I'm going to turn this guy in. Get that spring inside your plunger. Center everything up real good. It's going to be a tight fit. That rubber boot should go inside the solenoid, just like that. Now, thing to note, I didn't do any disassembly. If you like your fingers and the meat that's on them, put that, unhook your negative cable from the battery, tie it up, unhook the positive cable from your battery. You know, guys say, all you gotta do is take the positive cable off. Well, you know, if this starter solenoid makes contact and sends power to that starter motor, this little Bendix guy right here will pop out and index that. And man, I've seen pictures of dudes' fingers that got caught in that. And it looks like they got stuck in a meat grinder. You do not want to do that. That ain't gonna be a fun day. Just take the time and pop that off. I'm not gonna crank it down with this. I'm just gonna use it to do a bunch of the work for me. So I gotta screw that thing in the whole way. It's pretty tight in here. Any bike you work on, it's always going to be that way. Okay. I like that. That looks pretty good. We got a nice seal around all of there. We got a nice seal up in this cup. I'm still using that foam washer guy, so it should be providing the support that you want on that little rubber boot in there. And yeah, I have a feeling this would be a pretty good fix. There's it's just, if your Harley ain't leaking, how do you know there's fluid in it? There's that whole side of things. But you know, I don't mind if my Harley drips a few drops of oil on the floor. that ain't a big deal. But when the oil was coming up out of here and just dripping down the side of the primary, it just looks real dirty and ugly, and I ain't a fan of that. But on top of that, when I got my saddlebags on my gear back there, it dumps oil on all my gear. Now that's another thing. This is aluminum cast housing. You don't want to crank down on those bolts. Just snug them down real nice and smooth, and you'll be good. Yeah, I got a little bit of squeeze out there. That looks like a nice seal to me. I'm happy with that. The other thing, when you take your primary cover off, make sure, a lot of times some of these little spacers, these shims, will stick to the inside of the primary housing cover. Make sure that doesn't fall off and it ain't rattling around down there. Well, I'm gonna get some sealant on this and get it buttoned up. Alright, got my starter solenoid all cinched down. This all put together. I put a nice real thin bead of silicone, RTV silicone, all the way around the edge of the primary housing sealing surface and the primary cover. Now, a lot of guys will say, you know, use a fresh gasket, you won't have any problems. Well, man, I use brand new nice gaskets and they just never seem to seal well. No matter how tight or how loose I leave them, it's hard to get these guys to seal. And like I said, this thing's pretty pressurized now that it's got now it's got this sealed off system. So better you can get it, why not? So I'm gonna give it a little help. And I got my gasket on my housing. Got your derby cover off. Makes a nice place to get a good handhold. Got my gasket on the back of my cover here. Remember all your shims. Get it lined up. There's one alignment pin. You'll get a little bit of squeeze out on the top. Just run a rag over it and it'll look fine. A lot of guys will tell you that it don't look right or this, that, or the other thing, but you know. I like my fluids to stay inside my gearboxes, so that's just me. Again, I'm using a impact here, but I've done this many times and just using it to start them so it holds. Just want to get them all in there and then I'll get everything all set. I'll cinch it all down by hand. So that's pretty much the whole job. Then all you do is put your fluid in it if you've sealed off your primary. If not, you ain't got to do much. Put your derby cover on. So there you go, guys. Let you know how it works.